When Lisa Carter knocked on my door with a $5,000 fine for illegal hunting, I just smiled. What she didn't know was that her little piece of paper sparked a chain of events that would leave the entire HOA reeling. They thought they controlled every corner of this neighborhood, but there's one thing they didn't own: property law. When I started digging into those so-called community trails they hiked every morning, I uncovered a secret that turned their world upside down. If you've ever fantasized about teaching an HOA a lesson in private property rights, this story's for you. Drop a comment. Where are you reading from? I'd love to see our community's reach. I never meant to become the neighborhood outcast. 2 years ago, when I moved to Willow Creek Meadows, I was chasing peace. After 8 years in the military and 5 more in claustrophobic tech offices in Portland, I needed space. I'm Ethan Caldwell, 38, a remote software engineer for a cybersecurity firm. The job pays well, offers flexibility, and let me escape the city for this quiet suburb nestled against lush woodlands in eastern Oregon. Willow Creek Meadows seemed ideal. Modern homes, generous lots, and forests stretching for miles. The HOA fees were steep, $4.50 quarterly, but the agent swore it was worth it for the pristine community spaces and award-winning landscaping. What she didn't mention was that the Willow Creek Meadows Association was ruled by Victoria Hamilton, possibly the most controlling 38-year-old to ever clutch a rulebook. I met Victoria in my second week, when she arrived with a welcome basket stuffed with more HOA bylaws than actual gifts. "We're thrilled to have fresh faces in Willow Creek," she said, her smile cold. "I'm sure you'll love it once you learn our ways." That was my first red flag. Victoria, with her sleek bob and designer athleisure, was a senior manager at a top law firm and had been HOA president for 5 unchallenged years. I later learned no one dared run against her. For months, I kept my head down. I paid dues, mowed my lawn to code, and skipped the monthly HOA meetings which, according to my neighbor Claire Mitchell, were more like Victoria's personal tribunals than community forums. Claire, a 35-year-old kindergarten teacher 2 doors down, was one of the few warm faces here, often dropping off homemade cookies. "Don't let Victoria rattle you," she warned early on. "She thinks her way is the only way." I might have stayed off Victoria's radar forever if not for my weekend hobby. Raised in rural Idaho, I learned to hunt for my grandfather as a kid. It's not just a pastime, it's a tradition, a quiet focus that grounds me. In October, I found an 80-acre tract of pristine forest bordering our community, perfect for deer season. Curious about ownership, I checked county records and learned it belonged to Henry Larson, an 83-year-old retiree now living in Arizona. I emailed him, asking to hunt on his land, promising respect. He replied quickly, "I've owned that plot for 50 years. My family farmed its clearings. Haven't been back in a decade, arthritis. Hunt if you want, just send a photo if you bag a good buck." What I didn't know was that Victoria and her HOA crew had been using Henry's land for years as their private hiking haven. They'd carved trails, set up benches, and hung bird feeders, all without his permission, acting like it was theirs. This would soon matter. One crisp November morning, I headed out pre-dawn with my rifle. In a clearing Henry suggested, I bagged an 8-point buck at 9 a.m. As I began field dressing it, voices approached. Victoria emerged, leading 5 women in pricey hiking gear, chatting about neighborhood gossip. When she saw me beside the deer, her face twisted in horror. "What are you doing?" she shrieked, snapping photos. "This is a protected area. Who let you murder animals here?" I tried explaining I had Henry's permission, but she waved me off. "We manage these trails. Hunting's banned." 3 days later, an envelope was taped to my door, a violation notice from the HOA for cruel hunting, demanding $5,000 within 30 days. Furious, I called Claire, who sighed. "That's Victoria. She's been ranting at my school, painting you as a maniac. Parents are scared you're dangerous." She added, "Victoria's been leading her Willow Creek wellness walks on that land forever. I bet she never checked who owns it." The next evening's HOA meeting was my chance to fight back. The community center was packed. Victoria sat at the head, flanked by James Porter, a 42-year-old city worker and her loyal deputy, and Edward Walsh, the 55-year-old treasurer, who looked uneasy. I recognized Megan Foster, a 40-year-old notorious for snitching on minor violations. Victoria opened with a jab. Perhaps Mr. Caldwell can explain why he thinks violent acts belong in our nature preserve. Standing, I laid out my case. I hunted legally, with a license and the owner's written permission, on private land owned by Henry Larson. This is an HOA property, and your bylaws don't apply there. I shared copies of my license and Henry's email. The room went quiet. Edward frowned, studying the papers. He's got a point about jurisdiction, Victoria. She snapped. Those trails are ours after a decade of use. Ownership's irrelevant. James chimed in. Guns near homes endanger kids. The crowd, primed by Victoria, grew hostile, with Megan claiming she feared for her children's safety. A local cop, Officer Tom Reynolds, was called. He confirmed I'd broken no laws. He's got permission. No trespassing issue. This is civil, not criminal. Victoria doubled down. It's about standards. The fine stands. She warned I had 30 days to pay, or they'd lien my house. I replied, I won't pay an illegal fine. Consult a lawyer before you push this. Leaving, I grabbed a brochure labeling Henry's land as Willow Creek Nature Trails, with no mention of private ownership. That night, I called Henry, who was stunned. They're using my land? I never allowed that. Taxes are killing me, and I'm thinking of selling. An idea sparked. Henry, if you're serious, I'd like to buy. What's your price? As we talked, I saw a way to flip the script on Victoria. Digging deeper, I found HOA permit applications for a Victoria Hamilton Nature Park on Henry's land without his consent. They'd done surveys, sought grants, and held fundraisers, all for a vanity project. I hired Rachel Bennett, a 40-year-old real estate attorney. She confirmed the HOA's actions were an overreach, lacking grounds for adverse possession. When I mentioned buying the land, she grinned. That's a bold move. Let's make it airtight. Meanwhile, a harassment campaign began. My trash can stayed curbside mysteriously. Anonymous notes called me an animal killer. Neighbors turned cold. Claire overheard Victoria warning parents to avoid that dangerous man on Cedar Lane. I negotiated with Henry, settling on $750,000 for the 80 acres, a chunk of my savings and inheritance, but worth it. Rachel fast-tracked the deal. The HOA piled on, notices for improper trash storage, unauthorized parking, my truck on my driveway, and a reminder of the $5,700 fine with late fees. Claire reported Victoria planning a big park announcement, cozying up to Councilman David Hughes. I spotted Victor Hamilton, Victoria's 39-year-old architect husband, surveying the land. His firm, Evergreen Designs, was tied to the park plans. The day I closed on the land, Victoria and James delivered a lawsuit threat for the fines. I smiled. You'll hear from me in 48 hours. The next morning, they returned, expecting surrender. I invited them in, sliding over the deed to Henry's land, now mine. As of yesterday, I own the trails you've used illegally. All HOA activity stops now. Victoria paled, flipping through the papers. This changes nothing, she bluffed. I countered with a cease and desist letter for their fraudulent park plans. She stormed out, James trailing. That evening, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Claire texted, Victoria's livid. I posted no trespass signs and trail cameras, catching James and others vandalizing them. A reporter, Sophie Lynn, 39, from the Creek Gazette, interviewed me. I shared the story, avoiding slander. An ex-board member, Walter Hayes, 65, revealed Victoria ignored the land's ownership years ago, hinting at financial shoddiness in the park fund. At the meeting, Victoria painted me as a selfish outsider. Her husband unveiled park renderings, but I countered, the land's private. The HOA never had rights to it, and fundraising was misleading. The crowd turned chaotic, questioning donations. Laura Evans, the 42-year-old secretary, looked scared. After, Claire suggested Laura knew something. I met Laura at a distant cafe. She admitted the park fund, over $75,000, was funneled to Evergreen Designs, owned by Victor and James's sister, Patricia Porter. Victoria approved payments without bids, threatening Laura's job. I passed Laura's flash drive to Detective Mark Sullivan, 40, who launched a fraud probe. Victoria rallied, organizing a trail preservation walk, a mass trespass. I marked my land as a wildlife reserve, added fences, and alerted Sullivan. Saturday, Victoria led 30 protesters. Deputies arrived, warning of arrests. Victoria's crowd dispersed, her power fading. Soon, Sullivan charged Victoria, Victor, and Patricia with fraud and embezzlement. They'd siphoned $68,000 for personal use. The HOA board collapsed. Claire became interim president, auditing funds and setting transparency rules. I built the Henry Larson Memorial Trail, a legal public path on my land, with a plaque honoring Henry. The community embraced it. Victoria's crew took plea deals, probation, $100,000 restitution, and a 10-year ban from HOA rolls. They sold their home and left Willow Creek, reputation shattered. At the final meeting, we approved trail access rules unanimously. Claire smiled. This is community. The $75,000 repaid funded an ethics scholarship. I still hunt, now with neighbor support. The HOA serves people, not egos. Victoria? She's in an HOA-free apartment, a fitting end. I didn't just win. I built a better Willow Creek, proving sometimes losing something reveals its true value. Honesty, community, and justice.